It's different because it competes directly with the one thing human beings have over any of the things you want to come up with, which is a brain. Everything that's happened inside industrial plants and machineries with robotics, these are just repetitive physical actions. We haven't yet come for knowledge workers. We're entering something that you went to school for. It's a big problem. Nobody went to school for a jackhammer. So I think from a society basis, the group that it hurts the most are the younger people who had their dreams, who still have college debt. And I think that is leading to demands for changes in cities. Socialism is on the rise. And I don't think this is going to reverse course and go away soon, because AI's disruption to the labor market is only going to worsen going forward.
Jordi, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you, Bob.
Thank you so much for taking the time to sit with me today. You've been arguing that something historically new is happening. And it happened last year between the economic growth that we had with no labor growth. That sounds like something is breaking. What's breaking?
Let me not use a negative tense. I'm a very optimistic guy, Bob. So let's start with what's changing, what's evolving. To be honest with you, we've just reached the end point of what has already been happening for the better part of the last 15 years. Unfortunately, I think you have two forces right now that are happening that are making it a given that we can't create jobs. One is, if you stop immigration, obviously you're reducing the amount of people that are entering the workforce. So that's one of the issues that has happened that has not happened for the last 15 years. And the second thing is, the first 15 years, and I say 15 years because when the smartphone came out, we started to really expand on exponential innovation. And I realized something was wrong in 2012 when Mario Draghi put his defend the EU line in the sand, and the markets rallied. And I realized at that point that they could stop anything from happening from a monetary policy perspective, that we couldn't really have a recession if they were just going to come in and provide liquidity or even verbally throw it in. So I traveled to China. I realized that demographics were an issue there. You knew it was that situation in Japan. Europe was in the same situation the US was. And the emerging markets were never going to be big enough to run global GDP. So the question came in, is there ever going to be growth again? And yet somehow or another, we had companies like Amazon that were growing with multiples that were effectively infinity. So I went out to Silicon Valley and I learned a lesson very quickly. I went to Singularity University that the world that we knew, which moved at a linear pace, was now moving exponentially, and everything that happened along the way would be disruptive. And eventually you would get to the world of abundance, and it would take a long time. But let's say back in 2013, the viewpoint was that by 2045, so another 30 years, well, here we are. We're 12 years ahead, so maybe half of that. And exponential innovation, which was disrupting jobs, and the reason I know it was disrupting jobs is because we had 10% unemployment coming out of the GFC, and it worked its way back down to 3%. But during that time, we lost a lot of people who left the labor force. So labor participation rate dropped off. If the labor force participation rate was up the same level it was back then, we'd be closer to 10% unemployment. So when you're losing kind of people in the labor force through people having the ability to just retire because they're making money by stocks going up before it hits their retirement age, you've already had this going on. It's just that now the two forces are exponential innovation is going incredibly rapidly with AI, and we're now about to hire digital employees and then eventually humanoids. So it's never going to get better. But that's where we are. I wouldn't say that this is a new thing, but I would say that this is a reality that's been in place for 15 years.
But that reality is taking a shift. And last year, this growth without labor is the first time, certainly since the 1960s in the modern era, and you can probably go way back before you would find it again. What are the implications?
Most of them are great for the companies that are able to pull this off.
And the owners of those companies.
And the people that own the shares in the companies. It's not so good for people that either don't own shares or they're workers. And I think societally, that's why we have the issues that we have. And again, that's why I say these have been brewing now for 15 years. The upward mobility, that the dream that people had to be able to grow inside a company, to move up the corporate ladder. You and I worked a long time together at a company, and we've known each other in the industry a long time. Having that upward mobility is a very important mental component of wanting to work, of doing it. And so you've had this negative side. At the same side, the gig economy has allowed people to get a job immediately. So we're talking about the fact there's no hiring going on, but there's also no jobless claims, and everyone who can get a job can get a job. You just may not want to be a DoorDash driver or an Uber driver or any of the gig economy jobs that have been there, or a consultant, an temp job. All of these things have grown. And so I think from a society basis, the group that it hurts the most are the younger people who had their dreams, who still have college debt. And I think that is leading to demands for changes in cities. Socialism is on the rise. And I don't think this is going to reverse course and go away soon, because AI's disruption to the labor market is only going to worsen going forward.
This show is being brought to you by our sponsor, Trueflation. Professional investors and economists, and probably any casual observers, know that government inflation statistics are only an approximation of what real inflation is. Not only that, but the government has a conflict of interest because high inflation can be so damaging to the economy, the deficit, and our $36 trillion in debt. Trueflation collects over 80 million pricing data points. Most are updated daily to reveal inflation with precision for asset managers, governments, companies, and the general public. Check them out at trueflation.com. So there's a lot of talk about how AI is just a fundamentally different technological innovation. That it's not like the old days where technology actually was used as a tool to enhance human productivity. I think of the jackhammer as a great example instead of a shovel, where all of a sudden you can replace 100 workers with one jackhammer. Is that true? Is there a fundamental difference here, or is AI's potential that it actually allows any individual greater capability?
It's different because it competes directly with the one thing human beings have over any of the things you want to come up with, which is a brain. So, a jackhammer, a train for replacing whatever you want to replace, speeding up, everything that's happened inside industrial plants and machineries with robotics, these are just repetitive physical actions that they found a way to do. We haven't yet come for knowledge workers. And knowledge workers have to do with knowledge, thinking. I have an expertise. We're entering something that you went to school for. It's a big problem. Nobody went to school for a jackhammer. Maybe they were an apprentice. They learned on site, but they didn't go to 4 years of college and take debt out to go get a job for that. So you've run into a situation where AI is disrupting the entire social thought process of what it was. I don't know where you were in the college graduate side for your family, but I was the first. I was the first college graduate. So my mother had to drop out of college because she had me. My father dropped out of high school when he was a sophomore. So I didn't have this kind of viewpoint of college. I did take out debt for myself. My parents didn't have the money to pay for my schooling, so I did pay for my own schooling and eventually paid it back. But it's much harder to do that. So you were making a bet on yourself. If you're a hardworking person and you have a brain, and all of a sudden the competitors you have are not just the people that finished in your class or the people at other colleges across the country, but they're workers that work, and I want to make sure everyone hears this, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So when you get into 168 hours, and you go through the average weekly hours in the jobs number that comes out every month, and we're talking most recent numbers right around 34 hours. Mm-hmm. That 34 hours includes the time in the pantry. It includes the time talking about the football games in the morning or the TV shows that you like. AI agents don't do that. Digital employees don't do that. So you can see where output per hour, if a normal human being is only putting in a solid 25 hours when you extract the lunchtime and all of that stuff, cigarette breaks, everything, let's be generous and say 75. Let's wean down the AI agents. They only work 150. You're still talking 6 times the amount of output that can be generated. And that doesn't include the mistakes and all the cleanup and all the things that happen. So I just think we've reached a very important point where it's never going in reverse. I'll keep saying that. Human beings are not all of a sudden going to have their IQs go up dramatically to be able to outrun AI. This is a new world, and this is before the physical humanoids come into existence, really starting this year, but in a big way over the course of the next 5 years.
So this underscores one of the points that you've made that you don't find very often in the predictions around AI. And that is this idea that the competitive advantage of any entity, corporate entity or anything else, is collapsing or is likely to collapse as AIs allow for much faster competition.
Yeah, to go from an idea to monetization to a moat, I can't imagine it existing the way it has in the past. There's just, the competition is immediate and it gets worse every single day, or better, depending on how you want to define it. But we could sit here, we could have done this interview, I don't even remember when we first talked about it, but if we would have done it 3 months ago, I wouldn't have been able to talk about Opus 4.5, Claude, or Cowork. All of those have come out in the last 6 weeks, and they're mind-boggling game changers. I've now done a paper related to Opus 4.5. That was last week, and it's already now another week later, and now I have to do Cowork, which is basically a dig at Copilot. And this stuff is coming out too fast, and Cowork was built by Claude Code, wasn't by human beings. So Claude Code did it. So when you get to the point that the computers are building the computers, the robonoids are the humanoids are building the humanoids, well, that's where everything really starts to accelerate.
And actually, yeah, Elon Musk points that out. One of the interesting things about the Elon Musk interview lately, last week with Moonshots and the Mark Andreessen, was how both of them said multiple times a week, they review what they are receiving as output from the AIs, and they are awestruck. Wow. In both cases, they said it's remarkable. It is really, and if we're just getting to the point where there are only a couple of those a week, yep. You have to think that either the wow factor hurdle rate is going to go much higher, or there are going to be a lot more of them.
This is an interesting point, and for anyone listening, especially for your kids, but if you're our age, it works for you too. So it was August of 24 that I decided to take three courses on Coursera about Python. And the reason I did that was because a friend who was in already the AI business and had a consulting business basically said, I think you should do this. You're curious enough that I think you'll be addicted to it once you get through the limitations that come from not understanding the nuances of the computer, the way it works, what it actually does. Just understand it. It won't take you that long. And so I went to Coursera and I took these courses, and they're not long. You could do one of them now. You don't need to do 3. I did 3 for the repetition. So when you start a job, whatever the job is, and it's your first job out of college, when you get a year and a half into it, it's very hard to look back and remember how little you knew when you started it. It's also very difficult to know how much your knowledge has increased because it's gone so much during that year and a half. My ability to use artificial intelligence, to know the nuances of how to ask questions, to know what to ask it, what not to ask it, to understand why people don't like it. I can't recommend enough that people have to start using it every day for everything. Never ask it, to use something we talked about, never ask it a question trying to get an answer. That is the school way that they taught us, and that's also the Google search way. You're searching for an answer. That's not what AI is. AI is a discussion. It's a brainstorming event. It's going to get you to a higher probability of the answer of the only things that matter. Whatever you think the answer is to something, it's generally not the answer. If someone said, well, what's GDP last quarter? And I give them the number that was reported, is that correct? Of course not. It gets revised. So it's not the right answer. So really what you're asking for is, what was the last published thing that we know is wrong for you to look at? That is 99% of what we do in life. And so to use something to find an answer is you need an A on a test. You got to finish in the top 10. Google search, give me the answer. AI is not about that. AI is about increasing the probabilities of you making better decisions, plain and simple. And the only way to get to that point is to use it every day. And I guarantee if you use it every day, you question yourself. By the time 18 months comes, fast forward 18 months, you'll be shocked at what you can do today that you couldn't possibly think of doing 18 months ago.
We're proud to be sponsored by Foundation. They've created Passport, one of the top-rated Bitcoin hardware wallets, proudly made in the USA. It's fully open source and air-gapped, meaning your Bitcoin stays completely offline and secure. The shocking Bybit exchange hack shows why holding some Bitcoin offline diversifies risk. Now they're launching Passport Prime, your all-in-one solution for not only Bitcoin, but all passwords and 2FA security. Head to foundation.xyz to secure your digital future. Absolutely. And you know, we both wind up spending a lot of time listening to podcasts because it is a remarkable breakthrough in the spread of knowledge and the ability for anybody to tap into it. And it's so interesting that there are so many people that are embedded in this industry who you can listen to. And for anyone to think that AI, because it doesn't answer my questions well, is not a tool that I need to really know much about, is a great error. And as you've pointed out, that if you do embrace it, then all of a sudden you can start understanding that this is a tool that enhances your own productivity.
Yeah, I don't know who...
And creativity.
Yeah, I don't know who wouldn't want to enhance the time in their day through both efficiency and creativity, lead them down paths of curiosity that they must have. I only know the way that my brain works. I only know that I wake up every day and I constantly have questions that I know there's no answers to, especially regarding your health. There's no answer to your health. It's a biological system that changes every day based on what you're putting into it, based on what's happening with inside the cells and what's going on. I want to know things. And the only way to understand them is to have the question and the constant dialogue. I'm probably more amazed every day, especially now relative to, say, 9 months ago. And I say 9 months ago just because coming out of Liberation Day and watching people remain bearish, since this was my focal point, and then hearing the discussions on what would happen to micron technology and that, oh, there's a cyclical part coming, the AI bubble themes, the AI bubble conversation. How many times I was asked about AI bubbles last year? How many times I've talked about them on both my YouTube, but also on other people that have me on regularly. I was really surprised at how much people didn't get it. But then the more that I realized, you don't use it, so how would you get it? But I think it hit me this past weekend. I posted my video in LinkedIn, and I very seldom respond to the comments. And it's not because I don't care. I'm grateful for the people that are watching. Unfortunately, I'm doing a lot of different things, and I don't have the time because I'm so busy doing things. So I'll get in there occasionally. But there was one person who literally said AI is for losers, and gave this whole reason why.
It's like a perfect comment, isn't it?
And I was like, and I'm not going to like go through the rest of the stuff said, but it was clearly someone who was angry about AI. And I mean, AI is for losers was the message. And then for the backup, just put a link in there saying adoption's not happening. And I just remember sitting there going, it's literally watching people who don't use it try to find things to justify why they're not using it. See, I'm not in the minority in not adopting to it when it is changing our lives, and it's changing it for the better, and it will continually change it for the better. And that's why when you ask the things about the work side, I would love to not have to work. I would love to not have to. And when I say not have to, I like learning. I like teaching people at this point. But there is an element that's like, you know, I don't want to have to be forced to go to work. Now, I made the career choice of not going into an office. You did the same thing. Like running into an office every day, at some point when you get older, you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. It
has its merits.
Yeah. I don't want to manage people anymore. I don't want to deal with the bonuses at the end of the year and hearing all the complaints and everything. I don't want to do that anymore. Now I kind of have the world that I want, which is working with someone who's way smarter than I could ever be, talking to me about topics that no one person could ever talk to me about because they're not an expert in any one field. They're an expert cross disciplines, and being able to use questions that when you read about polymaths and you read about how smart Da Vinci was and how smart Ben Franklin, basically everything that that Walter Isaacson has written about following polymaths. Well, there's another element, which is if you're on the other side and you're asking questions to a polymath, It's amazing. The better the question, the better the answer. So I'm living in kind of a dream world, but I'm astonished at how many people think AI is for losers still.
Do you think AI is helping curiosity?
That's exactly what it does. I mean, if you're not learning to ask better questions by using it, you're not using it right. You're going the direction I said, which is you're spending too much time looking for answers.
It's almost advice for people. If you're going to use AI, you want to be affirmatively curious. Every question, think about what the next question to refine it is. And then the value begins to really accrue both ways.
Yeah, or ask when you're asking a question, describe what you want to do. In fact, for some reason, let me do it using health, because everyone at some point has wondered something about their health, because every human being, from an evolutionary basis, wants to live. Our brains interfere with that. So our DNA, our body, the evolutionary side wants to live. That is just like a plant, an animal, no different. Our brain sometimes gets in the middle of it. That's why I did this whole thing on HRV, because I'm like, all right, I want to tell you what you should be doing, not have you go through it. So if you get into a conversation where you say to the bot, to the LLM, I've had a problem with my knee. What I want to do is I want you to ask me questions about what I'm going to tell you, and keep going until we get to an answer, and then you can go through and try to figure out what's going on. Well, that's kind of the way a doctor does it, theoretically, except they're short on time. They can't do this forever. And most importantly, the other thing with curiosity and questions is awareness. I meditate. I'm a big believer in mindfulness. I'm a big believer of being present when we're in this interview or when I'm doing anything with another human being. Is just to be aware of what's going on. Well, you have the best information for your knee. And it's not just, my knee hurts here. Okay, does anything else hurt? Have your hamstrings been hurting? Has your ankle been hurting? What types of workouts do you do? How long has this been going on? Okay, over the course of the next week, what I want you to do is tell me, does it hurt at nighttime? Does it hurt when you sleep on this side? Does it hurt? It will ask you as many questions as you want, and then that context window is there. Now, when you want to go back to it, and by context window, so everyone knows, once you start a chat, it's there. It's in the history. You can go back to it, search in your chats and go, where's the knee chat? I want to go back to the knee chat. And if you spend the topic on your knee and you just highlight every day what it felt like, what you did, what the problem was, what shoes were you wearing, everything, you will be shocked at how this answer gets clearer and clearer and clearer and clearer over time. Because once you ruled out, well, it's not swollen. I'm not needing to use ice. It hurts more in the morning than it does at evening. I'm not sleeping well because I can't sleep with it here. Once you realize that those questions a doctor would never ask you, but you're getting better than doctor-like cross-disciplinary things, it'll come back with, it's most likely a sciatic nerve issue. This is what I'd recommend for you to do with it. If this doesn't work, go this way. Now you start that program. Then you ask it, okay, this isn't working. I'm using the foam roller. That's just a way that everyone can use it. And if they just start with that one thing on any pain they have or any issue they have, or the family member that they're trying to figure out, and not ask it, what's the problem with this? And just keep going through the questions, I think they'll start to appreciate the genius.
So here it is, the promise of AI. It really is. That's a great example. Mm-hmm. And it establishes that AI may be this thing that can erode competitive advantage in companies. I want to get back to that a little bit. It seems to challenge capitalism. And you use that word in the title of your 2026 essay. Yeah. Yet you're an optimist. Is this a threat to capitalism?
In my opinion, it is, on many, many levels. I just, I think people have to, I think they have to realize that these words that we create for things, they change over time always. So nothing is binary. I mean, nothing just ends. It kind of drifts off and it goes. You can't have a distribution of wealth problem that's so great in the country where so many people are now feeling it, where demographics lead to, I mean, New York City's vote is a world of it's two worlds. And, I think when we've had elections at the presidential level and everything, you can kind of break down and see that it's usually one block that kind of gears it some way, but the rest of the country is split 50-50 on everything. And I think New York City was a similar way. You could take demographics and then shift it. I think capitalism, the way that people think of it, that you come here, you work hard, you make a lot of money, you go through this, that has been evolving over time. If for no other reason, the United States has dominated the world because we embraced something or built something and then embraced it more than any country in the world and had a monopoly on coding. So I don't remember what year you got into the business, but I entered right at the peak of the Japanese market. And the Japanese market at that time was the number one weighting in MSCI World. And everyone was going to school, and most people were like, got to take Japanese because they're dominating. They've done just-in-time inventory. Everything was about Japan. And the reality set in that Silicon Valley, this little tiny area, started to have a dominance in coding. And eventually you fast forward 30 some odd years and you end up with all of the biggest companies in the world being in the United States. But during that time period, when we say capitalism is not a global thing. Europe's not thought of as capitalist. China's not thought as capitalist. Is there any other country in the world that's really thought of as capitalist? Or does that mean people would come here because of freedom and because of making money and going through it? Well, I think going forward, the competition is going to be a global competition because we've just democratized the advantages that the United States had. So I view capitalism as being under attack from distribution of wealth, being under attack from AI, but the AI is the end result of exponential innovation. So this gets back to something I've said on many interviews. I'm not sure we've talked about it, but Joseph Schumpeter wrote about this, and creative destruction is a real thing. And eventually, if you get to the point, creative destruction reaches a point where the distribution of wealth gets so bad that the people vote for socialism because that's what we're getting. And I think capitalism has reached its level that way, where you've put so much pressure on the voters that it's possible that we will vote for socialist presidents in 2028. Who knows? I mean, that's where we're headed towards.
It certainly isn't out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah. And I think that's an issue that people have to just think about. But I think it's just, again, it's not an end result that people should fear. I think it's just a migration of the world changing in the way that capitalists aren't going to be happy with. Socialists aren't happy right now. I'm sure we'll fling that back the other direction because I doubt socialism will work in the way that people want. And then we'll end up with abundance eventually.
Exactly. There's an optimism at the end.
Exactly.
Is there a way to separate out politics from just the economics of the reality of if what you're saying is right, that competitive advantage erodes rapidly outside of politics? Doesn't that fundamentally change the idea of economic capitalism?
Yeah, I think everything is changing.
Because ownership, it's hard to own anything. Yeah. It's you need to have a recurring an anticipation of a duration of revenues and cash flows for something to have value. And if that is being truncated rapidly, it's very difficult to give any sort of an investment multiple to it.
So in 2019, if we would have had this conversation, I would have not had kind of an answer to the question that'll be mathematical to a degree. So I'm since you've read a lot of my work, I wrote a piece on Bitcoin, and the piece on Bitcoin was about that it's the most mispriced trade I've ever seen in my life, and I go through how my father taught me how to handicap a horse race. Mm-hmm. So the similarities between, let's say, what you're getting into in terms of the markets and politics, let's connect the two. Let's forget the distribution of wealth, and let's just say you've got economics and a market associated where the wealth lies, and then you've got this other side of politics. So in 2019, I didn't have an answer for how this ended. It was one of the problems I had is I was migrating towards abundance, but I couldn't get my hands about, but there's something missing. How does the distribution of wealth normalize without there being a revolution? I don't understand. If these things are going to get so far apart, how do they come back together? And so 2020 during COVID is when my son made a lot of money trading crypto. He eventually lost it, as I like to say. He's so pissed at me saying that every single time, but that's true. He did make it and lost it. It's a good learning experience, so I'm happy to share. And he made a lot of money off very little. So it's a huge loss.
Those were the days.
Yeah, I know he's not watching this from up, no offense, but they're very unlikely his friends are going to see this either, unless you can get it to him. But it led to me wanting to learn about how he did this. And I was shocked how a 13-year-old could know as much as he did, just like a portfolio manager, educated. How did he know all this stuff? He knew every token he was long, why he was long them, the story behind them. So he had the narrative. There weren't any math associated with it because it didn't really matter. I was in shock. So I was like, well, this is a real thing, meaning not what he was doing, but crypto had reached a point that it had video game characteristics. But the way he was explaining it, there was a business side to it that in a sense, it made sense to me, because most of capitalism still is about intermediaries. There's someone in front of you to get something. That's where all this money goes. The tax for buying a house.
That's right. The economic rent.
Yeah, it's just it. And crypto and Bitcoin about decentralization and getting rid of the intermediaries made sense to me. So I started to listen to Bitcoin and actually try to understand how it fit into this equation. And when Michael Saylor, I listened to probably 6, 7, 8, 9 podcasts with him, he connected a dot. And the reason I say him, whatever your views are of Michael Saylor, they're wrong. He's a very, very smart person who happened to be a roommate with Peter Diamandis at MIT. He understands technology at an extremely high level, and he built a very successful software business. And he was very open when he decided to take his software business and go, this isn't working. I have $1 billion in cash sitting in my treasury, and the government has just moved rates to zero. So I'm getting debased where the cash that I have that I've accumulated in my business is now sitting there at zero. They're going to inflate their way out, keep the rates at zero, which means all of my expenses for my people and everything are going to go through the roof, and my cash is going to sit there. On the other side,
sit there declining in value.
Yes, I'm getting disrupted by Microsoft. They're eating my business, and I have no chance to compete with them. So I want everyone to think for a second. Anyone who's not able to compete in this world against AI, well, that's what Michael Saylor was saying. He was in a position where I can't win this game. So he made the decision to go to the board, which could have stopped him, and say, hey, I want to go buy a bunch of Bitcoin because I need to protect myself against the debasing side. This wasn't to take it against the Microsoft side. This was against the debasing side. But for me, it clicked in the point that I always thought about with abundance, which is every company is going to go out of business eventually relative to the Mag 7. They have the scale, they have the capital, and they have the technology, and they have a monopoly on code. Well, eventually, it started to click in, and that's when I started to really get believing that Bitcoin had a huge advantage. It was based on scarcity. So I had been staring at abundance for so long. And really what we're talking about is if AI and humanoids grow so rapidly, and we get to Elon Musk's world of abundance, well, in abundance, there's really no need for money. The only need for money is for the things that haven't become abundant yet, of which he doesn't think there'll be any, but let's assume there's some. But then there's the societal side of you can't just have no money. There's transactions and things that are going on. So that's too, let's say, scary of a situation. So I understand some form of value has to be there. And then I started to answer the question of when people say Bitcoin is gold, it's not gold. It's a store of value, which is true, but everything is a store of value. When you buy a house, you're hoping it's going to store value when you put the money in. You don't hope it's going to go to zero or expect it to. You're hoping that when you get out of it, you're going to make some money. But worst case, you're utilizing it and it's there. But if you have 5 houses, why do you have 5 houses? If you have 10 houses, 20 houses, if you put money into real estate, why do you have that? Michael Saylor's made that point. So I've just come to the conclusion over time that as AI disrupts everything and accelerates from here, this thing that's breaking up society, the value that we have, Bitcoin's value is $2 trillion. The total fiat system's assets are $800 trillion. That is completely off. And that's the mathematical side, which is the probability of Bitcoin, which has there's no moat. I mean, its moat is its scarcity. In a world where everything theoretically has no moat due to competition, it'll be the only winner left.
Yeah, and math is also part of that scarcity.
Yes.
There's a certainty to it.
Yeah. And so when people tell me, well, I don't believe in Bitcoin, I go, well, neither does anyone else. Because if they did, it wouldn't be 2 trillion versus 800 trillion. It would be 400 trillion versus 800 trillion. So the reality is you're in the majority. I believe this is a great opportunity to make money for my kids and for other people. And that's why I've created strategic Bitcoin reserves for them.
Well, Elon Musk talks about this abundance in a very interesting way. He says that the government can just print money because they can't print it as quickly as the goods and services are going to be growing. That would imply that a deficit doesn't matter. And I think in some ways it would imply that Bitcoin will not need to have value in the future, since the currency will be backed by ever-growing goods and services. Is there a dilemma there?
Well, let's go through the printing of the money and the debt and whatever people want to do. So the total sum of the net worth in the United States of America is about $180 trillion. The total debt of the government is a lot smaller number than that. The total currency in existence, because of the fractional reserve banking system, 1/10, 1/20, whatever you want. So
also, that is highly elastic. It's whatever you want it to be.
The fiat system is a leveraged system by definition, and this is global. So the part, and this is where I will always, Elon Musk is very good to listen to about technology and kind of industrial and engineering, everything like that. None of them seem to have taken any GDP classes or finance classes in general. And again, they're all smart and they all go through it, but they just throw these numbers out there. I mean, Peter Diamandis, not to pick on him, but in the podcast this week, he said, well, growth was, let's say 3% last year. So on $30 trillion, that's not 900. And I'm sitting there going, no. That's real GDP. Nominal GDP was much higher. So nominal GDP is what the GDP number is about, not real GDP. Real GDP takes out the inflationary component. The reason the Elon Musk thing, we could have 10% real GDP, but that could come from minus 4% inflation and 6% nominal. And the reason that's important is because that is the issue that comes into a deflationary force on this. You could put money into the system, meaning they could print money for the people out of work, but the assets could still go down. And that's the whole thing I've tried to say to people is you're at a very dangerous point. I believe the way this all normalizes is everyone that's long fiat assets is making money on the thing they're complaining the most about, which is the debt being shoved at the government, but also the leverage in the system. You could have the stock market go down 10% a year, no problem. And companies still be making money. You just have multiples compress. And at some point, that is the way businesses go. If people look at Adobe and Salesforce.com last year, they had record earnings. Their stocks were down sharply. Why were they down? Because of the coming abundance. You're going to start seeing this more and more with different sectors, in particular software, because it's the easiest one to jump on. I think this is going to happen at the fiat level. This is just a theme that I have in my head. I don't know how it's going to play out, but this is the reason why I'm long Bitcoin, because Bitcoin to me is the offset of everything I'm saying. So if the fiat assets were to come down, which hurts only the wealthy people, as all the demographics and as people die who control most of the world's money, hand it off to their kids who then buy Bitcoin and don't buy shares of stocks, which is the way they believe in the world. Over time, the system just kind of goes through this 25-year process of fiat assets creating no value and the money being transferred to other people.
Let's think about this transition period between now and the time that competitive advantage has eroded to 10 days, for lack of, let's say a month. I suppose if you have enough flexibility in the markets and the economy, that the value of the stock market in aggregate might actually go up as a proliferation of competitors comes and attacks the public incumbents. Is that possible?
If you wanted to start a copper mining business, how long would it take before you could start it and get copper out of the ground?
A long time.
So, I mean, I think we're talking
longer than a month.
15, 20 years. Okay. So let's go back and reverse this. That'll never happen. There's no copper companies coming to the market. The existing copper companies are going to be in existence for as long as we need copper. And we need a lot of copper, and we don't have a lot of supply copper. What'll change the copper needs we have is when Google DeepMind's advancements in materials allows us to figure out to create things like that. There will be immediate competition for everything. You said 10 days. That already exists. Like, it's overnight now. Because the only businesses, if you go, the businesses you've heard of Cursor, you've heard of Lovable, you've heard of Windsurf. These are code-based businesses. Okay, they're all worth a lot of money very quickly. The fastest growing companies in history for AI. I think Cursor was the fastest company to 500 million in ARR in history. Mercer, which was a $10 billion company now. The founder's 22 years old. These are all built on code, which means they can all be replicated. Now, can they be replicated quickly? Well, a copper company will take 15 years to come up. Any coding company, you can take any idea and you can recreate it immediately.
Yeah.
So that means that it's almost impossible for a US company to get to the scale that the Mag 7 did. So when people look at the markets, they have to remember that a lot of the ownership in the US stock market is coming from overseas. And a lot of that reason is because there was no competitors for those companies. That's not the case anymore. So this is a global thing. And that's one of the problems that comes in. And since we're running, we're doing a show for mainly American viewers, America's had a huge advantage. And I believe US stocks will underperform global stocks for this competitive reason, just because it's getting easier. I joke, but I'm not joking, that one of the negatives about both Japan and Europe has been that they weren't doing things in the best of shareholder value, whether it was hanging on to employees for a long time or just not being able to fire employees like in Europe. Well, now they're in their heyday. It's not about firing people. It's about not hiring people. If your business is growing revenues and you don't have to hire people and you have a demographic issue, that's like the holy grail. Because as people get older, you're not replacing them. So you're not hiring anyone. That's your revenue versus GDP, or revenue versus your cost, or revenue per employee. But then you also have the demographics. People are rolling off. That's like a home run. So those businesses are going to, they're going to see profit margins explode. And that's why I like foreign stocks over US stocks. If there's a surprising element to this year, I really do believe that the stocks that have dominated the world for the last 15 years will be the worst performers of the world. I don't necessarily think they'll be down, but I do think that they're going to have a hard time competing against the rest of the world.
So there's a somewhat egalitarian development happening around the world then? Or is it just the pullback of the extreme valuation?
No, I think it's the competition that, I don't know. Every young person wanted to go to school in the United States. We had tons of Europeans and Asians and people around the globe that came to the US. When you go through the leaders of a lot of the Mag 7 companies, they're not American. We had a huge benefit coming over here. Now, part of that benefit was the depth of the capital markets and things like that, which exists. The issue is right now, I don't think you're going to be able to go public. So that's one of the other things that we didn't talk about, and I probably avoided in your question. But I think the rise of the private markets is going to grow rapidly relative to the size of the public markets. I don't think you're going to be in business. All those companies I mentioned, Lovable, Windsurf, Cursor, Mercer, I don't think they're going to be in business long enough with what they do before someone else competes with them. And it might just be the big hyperscalers that compete with them.
True. I'm partially thinking about the Clarity Act. If that goes through, then we may have a whole tokenized economy where the issuance of the ability to raise capital is eased significantly. But we'll have to see what form that, how much the incumbents are able to shape the competitiveness of this whole new area. I'd love to talk about two sectors on that chart of inflation that we've seen. The sectors that have the highest inflation are the ones that are the most invaded by the government, federal government, and the ones that have the most deflation are the ones that are free from that. But education, healthcare. We touched on healthcare a little bit before. I'd like to hear your views on how AI can impact both of these areas. Let's start with healthcare, because the part of our deficit that seems to be the most out of control is in the healthcare area. Can AI fix this, and how quickly?
Well, the good news is it will fix it. There's not a question in my mind, just because of the math associated with where the health of human beings, and GLP-1s are an area that people should just be aware of, that has already helped people. I mean, this is AI related. Every single drug discovery that's happening gets impacted by the technology getting better from machine learning. AI did not just happen with ChatGPT. The healthcare industry, as much as anyone, has been spending an enormous amount of money over the course of the last decade with machine learning and with techniques. So on the one front, if you can identify, let's just pick one, cancer, the day it enters your body, the cost reduction is dramatic. If you can prevent people from becoming obese, getting diabetes, most of the cost for people in terms of the healthcare, which goes back into Medicare and Medicaid, happens at the very end of your life. And so if people can die healthy, then all of a sudden you've solved a lot of the problems that come with it. And this is not just an optimistic take. I wrote a paper last year for 22V on AI drug discovery. The JP Morgan conference is going on right now. I got a lot of outreach from people that said, oh my God, they're the main theme at their conference that's going to be going on this week is what you talked about. And I'm like, yeah, this was not I get everything from the news. I'm not like heavily involved with Eli Lilly and what's going on behind, but by connecting the dots with Google DeepMind being connected to InSilico, being connected to Eli Lilly, and understanding those three parts in terms of finding what the body needs to get better, actually having the ability of engineering it and doing it, and then the ability of distributing it, that's going to happen more and more. So GLP-1s are just an example of stuff, just like the vaccine for COVID was an example of it. So I have no doubt that that's going to help on that front. But a lot of the costs on top of that are the friction you mentioned in the insurance industry and things like that. So the paper pushing side, the call center side, one of my favorite investment themes for this year is the breaking of the silos. One of the hard parts about getting AI to be useful is to be able to access all of the data. There's a lot of data that it can't get. Now, the data it can't get because it's not on the internet. Let's assume Merck has all their private data and it's sitting somewhere and they've got all these tests that they've done over the years, but they're siloed by disease. And I don't know the way they're siloed, but if all that data is siloed inside the organization by disease, you can't just stick ChatGPT Enterprise in and have it go through. It makes it very, very difficult. This is where Palantir and Snowflake and Databricks and companies like that, they're involved in trying to make sure that you can access the data. Well, this is going to be a big theme going forward. There's going to be AI factories. So Lilly announced a factory with NVIDIA that they're building there because they basically are going to have their own data center to do models on everything, all of the data that they have, plus all the data that exists on the internet. Once you start getting into that, the cures will go up rapidly, everything will start happening. But for United Healthcare, it's the same thing. You want to combine all of those things and have access to all of that data. All of that stuff's going to be happening. And as that happens more and more over the course of the next 2 years, not 10 years, 2 years, and as AI agents are coming in, meaning the people that are actually doing the analysis are doing it around the clock, you're going to be shocked at how much we change the healthcare industry from the point of getting sick to the point of being cured and all of the insurance point in between. At the same time, on the education front, I'm a big believer that the value you're getting from an education from a scholastic basis has pretty much got to zero. If they're not supporting artificial intelligence. They don't know what to do with it yet. If I'm behind on that, please, someone from a school reach out. But every kid complains to me, and I don't find the college kids know anything about AI to the degree that I would expect someone that young to be. And it's because they're not allowed to use them. They're scared of using them because if they catch them with an answer that comes from AI, it's a problem. And I think that issue is going to take some time to figure out. I think someone's got to raise their hand, but schools, they don't seem to be ready to do it. They're looking for leadership on what the policy should be. Here's the way I see it. Separate the social side, which I think will still be relevant. I think kids go to school for the social side. You and I spoke before we sat here. I don't believe that AI can replace the human-to-human connection. I don't think that's going to happen for a lot of reasons, both from personal experience, but also from thinking about what human beings want to always deal with. Humanoids, AI will be a part of our lives side by side, but most humans want to deal with humans. And I think the social aspect of school will still be there, but I don't know why the social aspect can't be different. So I think the education system is already embarking on a big change. I think the costs have to go down rapidly because it's ridiculous how expensive it is. I just don't think what they're teaching in the schools is relevant, since it was really about memorizing things and not getting people to ask good questions, when that is the number one thing that you need to excel with AI, is to ask good questions.
Yeah, what's interesting about the education system in particular is that there don't seem to be the elements of reform within it. It's hard to see that in the K through 12, and it's hard to see it in the university system. I think that this is if AI is going to have a big impact, it's going to be a bottoms up impact, most likely.
I only learned later in life why I've said it publicly many times, I hated school as a kid. Part of it, I'm sure, comes from the way my father, the fact that he didn't graduate high school, but he really taught me a lesson. He said, everything you hear is someone's opinion. Now, mathematically, if your brain is geared towards probabilities, which is the way my brain is used, and efficiency, when someone was saying something to me, unless it's entertaining or something I'm really interested in, I'm going to get bored very quickly, because I know whatever they're saying is not true. And I hate to say that to people, but it's like, that is the reality of this. I don't care what you think is a fact. It's not a fact. Whether it's who won a war, what happened at this war, unless you were there, you don't know the true story. I mean, everyone has probably seen a TV show eventually where it's like they do an interview with 20 people at a crime site. The 20 people all have different versions of what they have, but they were all witnesses. So everything that you hear is someone's opinion. It is just not a fact. And if you go through life believing that, then what you're doing is you're trying to take those 20 people, get what they all say, and then cross-reference everything to come up with the highest probability of what actually happened. And then it's 85%, 90%. That's the way I do everything in life. That's the way I use AI. And that's why I use all 5 models. Believe it or not, this is a good learning curve for everyone. When I'm doing anything where I want to get the answer to something really important, if I'm writing a big paper or I'm doing something on health, I will put them into all 5 chatbots that I pay the highest subscription for. I will get all of their answers. I will ask then one of them, usually Gemini, because I find it to be the most academic. As someone who hated school, I can usually pick out the most academic one, and Gemini is the most academic one.
Does that mean it's annoying?
It means it's medicinal. It's boring. It's no
aseptic.
flair. Yeah, it's like they're not trying to sell you anything, which is good, but it's just not. It's not for what I want. But I use that to consolidate. Then I take that consolidation and I go run deep research reports on all of them. So I go from a question I have, I get the answers, and then I'm going to go deeper with a deep research report, which is going to spend a lot more time coming back, and then I consolidate that last one. So it's been through multiple strainers to filter out this stuff. So I'm a big believer when you get to the end result of this, that sage on the stage, which is what I realized later in life was what I hated. You have to think, why would school people be fighting when they're the sage on the stage? There's an arrogance involved, in my opinion, that we don't want to lose that thing to artificial intelligence. And that's a reason to not speed up the process. It's their job. So they'd be putting themselves out of a job. So I don't think they're going to be fast to move on this.
Yeah.
Just to gut guess.
Well, it's funny. There may be something about human nature that wants us to cling on to what we think are facts. I laughed earlier when you said GDP is, you're going to go find the latest fact. It's just the latest before the next revision.
Yeah. And I do want to say this because I went to Manhattan College, which is not known as, a college where people will come out from finance and go through it. I had some amazing professors there. I also had some that I couldn't stand. And so if you ever get into a discussion where
and a lot that you don't remember.
Yes. If you ever get into a discussion where AI is replacing things and the person is getting all defensive because you're talking about their job, and this happens all the time. I remember I wrote one about librarians. I was attacked on LinkedIn by librarians because I was like, well, that's what it's like. You go in there, but now you have AI. It can give you the answer to any book you want immediately, as opposed to having to go through the whole process of finding it. There are, in every profession, there are going to be the top 5% in my mind that are better than anything AI can ever do. And the reason is because the entertainment factor, the ability of connecting with individuals, the understanding of the person sitting there, the bringing out the best of as many of the people as they can, not losing attention of people like me. There are phenomenal teachers that should have their own ability to build their own business and teach people in something, travel through Europe, get the social thing all mixed in. I just think the way we think of school is gonna change.
I think so. And I think it's become, it has the potential to become much more individualistic,
Yes.
driven by curiosity, and that would accelerate a
Wouldn't you
person's
wanna-
ability to interact in the world.
Wouldn't you want to go to a college where you go take a trip to a site, or you, through virtual reality, you go to the actual battlefield, and you're not talking about who won or who lost, but you're talking about a particular event and the ways it could have been different, what could have gone on, and you're asking questions about it with a professor who's not just knowledgeable in this, but it's also knowledgeable in other things. It gets back to the polymath side. By having AI, you can learn any topic you want. You don't have to be an expert in history or an expert in this. You just don't. You don't have to be the smartest in it, because AI is always going to be smarter than that person. It's already passed all the exams. It's already done all that stuff. So I think PhDs and all the parts that are being used for people to teach other people, I think you can make it a combination of entertaining, keep the social aspects, and also at the same time allow the professors to be more versed in a variety of different topics.
So we're optimists. The people that are the most embedded in the AI world seem to be optimists. Let's talk a little bit about what can go wrong, the fourth turning gives everybody a negative idea about what the fourth turning is, because very usually it's resulted in world wars or large military conflicts. How do we avoid that? How do you see, we talked a little bit about politics earlier, and it's not impossible that we see a Mamdani look-alike running for national office and maybe gaining national office. How does this unfold between now and abundance?
So the optimist in me is where we'll get to. All right, let me answer this with a personal experience. So I gave the eulogy for my grandmother in 2017, I believe. Yeah, 2017. She was 97, just about to become 98 when she died. So if you do the math, you go backwards, she was born in 1920. So when I gave the eulogy, most of the people that were there were obviously older. She died in my mother's home, so it was in my mother's arms. So it was a nice end of her life. But I was asked to do the eulogy partly because I like speaking, as you can imagine, but partly because it was important to my mother that the message came across in a way that would make people remember it and also think of my grandmother a certain way. So what I chose to do was to talk about how the happiest person that I knew, the most optimistic person I knew in terms of just taking each day at a time, was born in 1920. So that means when she was 9, we had the market crash. When she was in her teens, we started the beginning of heading towards World War II. And when she was 25, she finally got to not have a depression and World War II. And yet that person was optimistic. I bring that up because I'm not a fool. There's most likely going to be some bad events that happen. Do I think World War? No. I've been in public speaking about this for many, many years. I hated going to conferences because at the end of the conference, they'd roll out 2 people. The dollar is going to collapse and there's going to be World War III. And they'd always roll these people out at the end of the conference. And I would usually leave right before them because I didn't want to hear these things. Because one of the reasons that you don't have World War III is deterrence. And once we got to the nuclear side, which is we have this thing that you don't know, let's do. I think now the rumors or the stories going around with Venezuela that the U.S. has some weapon that we've never seen before, which has been kind of going around the New York Post and X and everything, it just keeps this belief that there's this weapon that's only going to get worse. We don't know how many humanoids someone has. We don't know how many drones someone has. We don't know this. So unless you're going to send a missile over the earth, I'm not into the war thing. But what I do believe will happen, which we're already seeing, there's a race for AI and it's based on commodities. And we're at the physical constraints and we need them. China's ahead in power. Well, that means they're going to have better AI in us very likely in the next few years. Now, that's what Elon Musk has said. That's what other people have said. I'm not on the same camp as Elon on this. I actually think, based on what Jensen Huang said last week with Rubin and the efficiency gains that are happening, which we have the advantage of, maybe we're offsetting some of these, and in the course of the next 3 years, we'll actually figure out a problem to solar and connecting this stuff in a bigger way. So I'm not as worried, but I think it would be naive to not think that there's going to be issues that happen. For the fourth turning, you could view it as the scary thing of wars. You could also view it as the societal break that is happening. And I believe that is the part that is a reality. I think we'll come out of it stronger as we get to abundance, but I think people are going to be defending their turf for the next 10 years. It doesn't matter what field it is. I gave the example of professors. I think everyone's going to be defending their jobs and defending their turf to try and keep supremacy in a world where there's better thinking and soon to be better thinking human figures out there that can work 24 hours a day and are stronger than us and everything else. So the advantages we had above lions that allowed us to get to this point, there's going to be a creature that's stronger than us pretty soon.
So that there is where your pessimism lies. The stronger creature.
I just don't know how the response will be. I don't think it'll be good. Because I do believe the distribution of wealth is a passionate issue for people. I remember when this hit me first, since I grew up poor and my parents didn't graduate college, and I had the fortune of getting a job at Morgan Stanley at very low levels. When I joined there and I got paid $30,000 the first year, I remember sitting there saying, if I ever get paid $75,000 a year, I've made it. Now, part of that came from thinking what my father maybe had ever made as a construction worker. Part of it, though, was just not the naive that was there. Once I moved up the ladder and I reached those numbers and above it, and then people started to work for me, I started to realize something which is true. At the firm I was, people didn't care what their number was. They just cared that it was $1 more than the person that they thought was their equal. And I used to find that fascinating. So if that person makes a lot more than you, but you're making a lot more than you did last year, that's not the point. Human beings care a lot about the money they have compared to other people. And so the distribution of wealth is creating an issue. People are making money, they have jobs, employment's low, but people are getting angrier and people's views of the workforce and the employment situation are worsening, but they have jobs. Go back to my grandmother in depression. Anyone that could eat was in a luxurious spot. Now we're talking about people that not only can eat, they have enough food in them to complain, get fat, and blame everyone else for their problems, which is what a lot of the stuff going on is. But I can see that their problem is more, I don't have the life that my parents had or that the people I see in this city have, or I can't afford to live in this city. And the reason I can't afford to live in this city is because the wealthy people have driven the prices up so high that I can't afford to have it. And I have 3 daughters that are in the healthcare field. I see this and feel this every single day with them.
Yeah. Well, I think we've solved all the world problems.
We will never do that, Bob. No matter how many times we do this, we will never do that.
I wrote a piece about the potential for war, and there are an awful lot of offsets to prevent a world war of magnitude that we've ever seen before. Let's hope that holds.
Yep, we're not the ones making the decisions. So it's kind of like when we work back together at Morgan Stanley. We just show up every day and hope the people in charge are making good decisions. It's not our fight to figure out. So
that's right. Well, it's great to see you again. Thank you so much for the time.
Pleasure, Bob. Thanks.
I believe the next generation can live better than any before it, but only if we stay curious, keep learning, and refuse to accept decline as inevitable. If that message resonates with you, please hit subscribe and share this video with someone who's curious as well. And if you'd like to go deeper, you'll find essays and research on my Substack. The link is below. Until next time, keep exploring.